So if you could just start off telling us who you are, that'd be great.
Okay, my name is Doug Racine. I live in Richmond, and I am the Secretary of the Vermont Agency of Human Services.
And how was your idea of social justice shaped?
In many different ways. It was my family upbringing. It was a middle-class family, but I recognized as I went through life that I had opportunities that not every kid has the same chance to have. He grew up with an intact family. My dad was a working person. He ran a service station. But we were never lacking for housing or food or clothes. We didn't struggle. And I see kids growing up in similar economic circumstances now where there's one income as it was in my family. My mom stayed home with my two brothers and me. But they're struggling. They're struggling to provide the basics for their family. And the kids don't have the same opportunities. I had an opportunity to go to college. I had an opportunity to work on Senator Leahy's campaign when I graduated from college. I had many opportunities, and I see a lot of kids who don't have similar opportunities. And I think one of our functions as society, operating in our communities through our nonprofits, our schools, and also operating through our government structures, is to make sure all kids have an opportunity to succeed. I was sort of brought up with that ideal of, every little, at that point, every little boy could grow up to be president. Now every little girl can grow up to be president too. But the idea that America was about opportunity and everybody had an equal chance. And I don't see that in our society today. I don't see it in our economy today. A lot of families are struggling, and they can struggle for their whole lives without escaping from difficult circumstances. So I see social justice as the reason, as a means to help all kids get off to a good start and give all kids opportunities. What we do with our opportunities as we become adults is really going to be up to us. But if we all start off on somewhat of a level playing field, having the chance to get a good education and get off to a good start, I think that's my definition of social justice.
Great. Earlier you talked a little bit about having responsibilities towards others. How do you think that going through life with this mindset of being responsible not only for yourself but for others can better the way that we act as a community together?
Well, I think the definition of a community is that people do come together and they do work together. Here in Vermont, and you as a Vermonter, you know this, there's that tradition of raising the barn. If a family has, a farm family had the barn burned down, all the neighbors would get together to help out. We see that spirit still in Vermont. We saw it after Tropical Storm Irene hit us. Communities came together, they helped out people who had been hurt by it. They gave of themselves to help somebody else in their community to make for a stronger community. And it's that kind of spirit that I believe should be motivating us in Vermont and in the country and really around the world. That if we have opportunities, if we have some sort of privilege, if we've done well, if we've just been luckier than others, I believe we have a responsibility to look at our families and our neighbors and our communities to see where we can give back, where we can be helpful. I grew up, yes, what motivated me and how I got to where I am. I grew up mostly in the 60s. Those were my formative years. And President Kennedy famously called upon us to think about others and ask what we could give and ask how we could participate. Programs like the Peace Corps came out of that so that Americans could give back to the rest of the world, to take advantage of the wealth that we have to help others who are in difficult circumstances. So that's part of what formed me, is that sense that we can help others, and there's a responsibility as world citizens, as Vermont citizens, to help others who may need help from time to time.
Great, thanks. Also, I think we're really lucky to have someone like you working in our government, and I wanted you to talk a little bit about how your values play into the work that you do and how you approach different issues and try to put your money where your values are.
Well, I'm working with a budget that's as the Secretary of the Agency of Human Services, and the budget's determined by the legislature working with the governor. It starts with the governor making a recommendation, so I'm very much at the table when we're having those discussions. And my job is to let the governor know what it is we're doing with the money that we do have, where the additional needs are, where we might be able to do a little bit better. It's ultimately his decision, the legislature's decision. But my job is to explain exactly where we are and what we are unable to do with the money we have so they can make informed decisions. It's up to that political process to determine whether we would spend more on a given program or not. But I feel my job now is, while the budget's being formed with the governor, is to be really an advocate for the Vermonters I serve. But once he makes his decision, and governors have to balance all the various needs of state government. It's not just human services, it's protecting our environment, it's having a good transportation system, it's supporting our schools and all of those things. He's got to do that balancing. But once that decision is made, I go to the legislature to talk about that budget. But when they ask me questions about where there still might be deficiencies, I'm very open and honest with them, because ultimately, as the representatives of Vermonters, the people who elected them, they have to make those budget decisions. But I try to take my values, and people know my values. The governor hired me knowing exactly who I am, that I believe we do have shared responsibilities, and that government programs can help people through difficult circumstances. I just make sure I bring those values to the table. And also internally within the agency, I try to make sure we're making the right decisions on what our priorities are. We're always setting priorities. One of the toughest part of my jobs is when people come in and say, we need some more money, and sometimes I can say, yes, I'll try to do that. But sometimes I have to say no, that there isn't enough, and we have to make tough decisions within the agency. What I try to do is manage the agency in an effective and efficient way so we can make maximum use of the money that we do have. So we get the highest value as we are able to accomplish more with the dollars we have, so we can feel that we're really making a difference in the lives of the people we serve.
Can you talk about a specific time when putting the money towards those values had a really positive outcome?
Both in my current job and actually going back to my previous jobs, which were in the legislature and as Lieutenant Governor, I think of programs such as the Parent-Child Centers. There's the Parent-Child Center here in Addison County. There's a network around the state. That took an investment. Those investments were made, and that whole network of centers was built in the 1980s and 1990s. We see results from that. We see families are better off. These are centers that are dealing with, working with families who are struggling, oftentimes single parents, a lot of times young parents, families living in poverty, living with some difficult issues sometimes. There have been issues of health problems, mental health issues, substance abuse issues, and they're there to help. And they're there to help those families do well by their kids, so that the problems that families might be having and the struggles they're going through won't lead, as they could, they won't lead to a neglect of those children or even outright abuse of those children. We've seen great results in reducing the amount of abuse and neglect of children in the state of Vermont. We aren't living in an ideal society. There's still more than any of us would like to see. But when I compare us to other states, what we've been able to do here in Vermont, because of programs like this and others, we've had an impact on that. And that's to me, what more can we do than as a society to make sure that kids are happy and healthy and safe and are not being neglected and abused.
Great, thanks. So one thing that keeps coming up around ideas of social justice is vulnerability, and how that plays into actually the idea that wholeness isn't perfection but imperfection. And I see that a lot in the Parent-Child Center and in other social justice work. What do you think about the idea that in order to create wholeness, you actually have to embrace vulnerability?
Well, we all have vulnerabilities, and I think one of the challenges in working with a lot of families who are struggling is to recognize their vulnerability, but also recognize their strengths and look at that whole person. Everybody has strengths, and oftentimes something I struggle with in the job that I have now is the idea that people have nothing but vulnerabilities. And I think it's we're selling people short. Even people who are struggling have some inner strengths, and one of the challenges in working with vulnerable citizens, working with families who are struggling, is to help them find that inner strength and to build on that strength and to try to get them to help them get to a better place One of the things I talk about in the Agency of Human Services a lot and recently is trying to change our focus from just services, which will help people maintain, and it's very important to, because people need to survive. But also to use those services as tools to help people develop their full potential, to get to a better place, to get out of poverty if that's possible, or somebody with a lifetime disability, to get them a higher quality of life. So it's recognizing what they're struggling with, but also recognizing that there's potential to do even better. I've been saying I want to change the name of the agency from the Agency of Human Services to the Agency of Human Development, because that's really what the work of that agency is, and that's what we should be helping people do. It's yes, you need various services to survive, to get through a tough time, but are we putting things together, and are we working with people to not only deal with the symptoms that they face, but also some of the underlying causes? Are we getting them substance abuse counseling? Are we getting them mental health services? Are we helping them get back to school and get an education so they can get a better job? I think it's our responsibility in the Agency of Human Services now to help people find that better place and to develop that full potential. So at some point I'm going to ask the governor and the legislature to change the name of the Agency of Human Development.
Wonderful, thank you. Do you have a story, a specific story maybe about an individual or family that you can think of where you embraced that idea of development and it had a really wonderful outcome?
There's one. I've got a friend who works as a mentor. She's had 2 children, 2 girls who she's mentored, and I've watched her make a difference in those 2 little girls' lives. Going through a tough time where the family was evicted from their home. I actually helped get through a tough situation where, because of the actions of the mom, the children were hurt as well. Evicted from the apartment, all the kids' toys and clothing and school books were wrapped up and put in storage, and I said, we can't get them back until mom pays the back rent or whatever. And I said, that's not right. I can understand why mom has to be pushed hard because of the circumstances that she's let herself get into and the decisions that she's made. But why are you punishing the children? So it's just a little thing, but I watched different programs come together, different people come together to say we're going to rescue these kids' clothing and their possessions because we don't want to hurt the kids. So that's, it's a little thing, but too often in a government agency the size of the one that I head, we deal with lots of statistics and numbers. We deal with whole populations of people. And it's important for me to remember the people I work with, to remember that they're individuals and they're individual kids out there. And you make a difference in people's lives one at a time by having somebody who cares about a family, about a child, to try to make that difference.
Thanks. Do you have any other closing words, any ideas that you want to throw out there?
Well, as I talked to your class here earlier today, what I wanted to emphasize is that whatever walk of life people choose, they have a role to play in their communities, and some will get right into direct services. They might be teachers, they might be social workers, they might become medical professionals and work in one of the caring professions. But there are other ways of making a difference, and I've said, as I said to your fellow students, I need people in my agency who have accounting backgrounds, who have business backgrounds, people who can contribute that way. Or there are people who choose to go into a different life, a world of business, let's say. But they're still community members. They're still, they most likely have families of their own. They can obviously make life better for their own kids, but they can be involved in school activities. They can be involved in community activities. So for me, what's most important is that all of us in a community, all of us living in a complex and challenging society, that we're in challenging times right now, try to find our role, not only to help ourselves to do well and to help our immediate families, but to help others in our community who are struggling and need that helping hand. And one of the beautiful things about Vermont, one of the things I love best about Vermont is I think we have that spirit in Vermont. People do come through for each other. We see it when something bad happens in a community. We do see people rallying around, and it's holding on to that spirit and recognizing we're all in this together and we're all stronger if the community is strong.
Great, thank you so much. It's really inspiring to
Okay.
hear these words, so we
Okay,
really
well,
appreciate
thank
it.
you. And I appreciate what you folks here in this class are doing and in Middlebury, trying to reach out to the community and make a difference. It's exactly what I was just talking about, so thanks.
Yep.
Have no place to go. Have no place to go.